Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at an editorial from page number 6. This editorial analyzes the unreliability of the rapid test kits that are being used to detect COVID-19. See, the introduction of rapid test kits for COVID-19 was considered as a game changer because it provides for faster results and it helps in scaling up the number of tests that are being carried out. These rapid test kits have been compared with home pregnancy test kits because it provides for faster results by simply telling whether the test is positive or negative. See, the diagnostic approach of rapid testing is very different as compared to the approach of traditional diagnostic methods such as the RT-PCR test. RT-PCR stands for reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction test, and this traditional diagnostic method is looking to positively identify the presence of the virus in the nasal swab that has been taken from the suspected patient. But such a traditional diagnostic test is considered to be more complex, time-consuming and resource-intensive because these tests can be carried out only in certified labs and it requires specialized equipment and trained technicians. So naturally, the results of a RT-PCR test take a day or two to arrive and its testing rate happens to be slower. But the results are highly reliable and accurate. But considering the rapid and exponential spread of COVID-19, there was an urgent need around the world to scale up testing. And that's when government started looking for tests that could provide for faster and reliable results. So when rapid test kits were introduced, they were hailed as a game changer because they employed a very different diagnostic approach and they could help in scaling up testing by providing faster results. Rapid test kits employ a very different diagnostic approach because they're not looking to positively identify the presence of SARS coronavirus 2. Instead, they're looking to identify the presence of antibodies against the virus. And if these antibodies are detected in the blood sample, then it indicates that the person has been infected in the past and he might have acquired immunity against the infection. This diagnostic approach was seen as a game changer because it not only provided for faster results, but it also helps governments to determine as to what percentage of the population has acquired immunity against COVID-19. And this could help governments to work out an exit strategy from the lockdown. So as rapid test kits became popular around the world, even India ordered lakhs of rapid test kits, most of them from China, and they are currently being used for testing in a number of states based on the directions of the Indian Council of Medical Research. But now it has emerged that the results of rapid test kits are highly unreliable because there is a 30% margin of error. Studies have shown that rapid test kits can be highly unreliable, and as a result, a number of positive cases can be missed out during testing. State governments such as Rajasthan, which have been using these rapid test kits, have noted a similar experience, and hence they decided to stop the usage of rapid test kits. Because they noticed that cases which had been declared as negative through rapid testing started turning out to be positive when tested using RT-PCR tests. So considering this unreliability of rapid testing, a number of state governments decided to stop the usage of these kits. And they even found these kits imported from China to be faulty. So considering the risk involved, the Indian Council of Medical Research recently directed all the state governments to stop using rapid testing for a few days. And it has advised them to use rapid test kits only for surveillance testing and not for confirmatory testing. So in this context, the editorial is asking the Indian government to exercise caution while importing these rapid test kits. And it is asking India to not base its lockdown exit strategy on these unreliable test results. So due to the unreliability of rapid test kits, the World Health Organization and governments around the world, including the United States and European countries, they are looking for a testing method which is not only faster but also reliable and accurate. So India should also join these efforts because this is the key to work out a calibrated exit from the lockdown. See, as we have discussed in the past, a lockdown is just like hitting a pause button. It only provides a small window of opportunity to the government to scale up testing as quickly as possible. And if the testing method is faster and reliable, it will help the government to quickly identify the patients and isolate them and treat them in order to contain the spread of the pandemic. So if testing is not scaled up during the lockdown period, and if most of the test results are faulty, then once the lockdown is lifted, then we are definitely going to witness a second wave of infection. So if this has to be avoided, and if we have to work our way out of the lockdown in order to revive the economy, then what we need is faster and reliable testing methods that can be easily scaled up. So for this purpose, the editorial is asking the Indian government to closely work with the diagnostic regulators of other countries such as the United States, Europe, China, etc. If India ties up and works with the diagnostic regulators of these countries, it will help India to make the right purchase decisions by carefully reviewing the proposed import of test kits from these countries. See, in the case of faulty test kits that India has imported from China, it has been noticed that the Chinese manufacturer had violated the regulatory norms, and that's the reason why the editorial is asking the Indian government to tie up with the diagnostic regulators of these countries in order to carefully review the purchase decisions before importing the test kits. Because as we discussed, the key to exiting the lockdown and reviving the economy is all dependent on our ability to scale up testing with faster and reliable results. Now let's take up a column from page number 6. Through this column, the writer is trying to analyze the possible reasons behind the surprisingly slow spread of COVID-19 in South Asian countries as compared to countries in North America and Western Europe. See, all the 7 countries in South Asia, including India, they started reporting their first cases in late Jan or in early Feb. By early March, a major outbreak was being reported in most of the South Asian countries, but surprisingly, the progression curve was nowhere near what was being seen in the United States, Italy or Spain. Throughout March and April, the progression curve in South Asian countries has stayed way below what we have seen in North American and West European countries. In fact, South Asian countries such as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and even Sri Lanka, they have even managed to flatten this curve. This has been the case despite South Asian countries having one of the highest population densities in the world and one of the weakest healthcare systems in the world. On the other hand, North America and Western Europe have lower population density and one of the most modern and sophisticated healthcare systems. But despite these factors, the COVID-19 curve for South Asian countries as compared to the exponential curve that has been seen in North America and Western Europe. For example, if you compare the figures in India and the United States has registered a staggering number of cases and deaths, and it has recorded close to around 9 lakh cases and around 50,000 deaths. On the other hand, India has registered hardly around 23,000 cases and the death count is slowly approaching 700. So the writer calls this surprisingly large difference between the developed countries and the developing underdeveloped countries as a paradox. And he tries to offer 2 possible explanations behind this paradox. According to him, one of the possible reasons behind the slow spread of COVID-19 in South Asian countries could be underreporting of cases by the governments due to very low testing rates as compared to the Western countries. But this possible explanation can be verified because if it is true, then in a week or 2, we should be witnessing a sudden surge in the number of cases in South Asian countries because these would be the cases that went undetected due to low testing rates. But if this doesn't happen in a couple of weeks, and if hospitals are not flooded with patients, then this cannot be the possible reason behind the surprisingly low number of cases in South Asian countries as compared to Western countries. The other possible explanation could be the impact of the lockdown. See, most Western countries started imposing a lockdown by early March when there was an exponential increase in the number of cases. In comparison, South Asian countries went into a lockdown in the last week of March. But despite this, the lockdown has failed to have an impact in these countries because the Western countries were very late in imposing the lockdown, and by the time they brought their countries under lockdown, the number of cases had already exploded. But on the other hand, South Asian countries, which started witnessing a slow increase in the number of cases in the 2nd and 3rd week of March, they were very quick to react and they imposed a very early lockdown as compared to the Western countries. And this could be one of the possible reasons why the number of cases in South Asian countries is surprisingly lower as compared to the developed Western countries. Data available from South Asian countries such as India has shown that the lockdown has had an impact and it has helped the country in flattening the curve. But the second reason also doesn't offer a complete explanation because even though the Western countries were late in imposing the lockdown should have had an impact later. But contrary to this expectation, the cases have continued to rise in the Western countries even after the lockdown was imposed. Whereas in South Asian countries, the lockdown somehow seems to have worked and it has helped in breaking the chain of transmission. But however, it is still not clear as to why the lockdown has not worked in the Western countries, and currently we do not have a valid explanation for this. So this is where the writer tries to present a possible hypothesis. But please remember that this is just a hypothesis being presented by the writer, and whatever we are going to discuss is not conclusive and has not been proven yet. The writer says that the exposure of South Asian countries to the BCG vaccine and malaria and the harsh climatic conditions of South Asia could be one of the reasons behind the slow spread of COVID-19 in these countries. See, in previous classes, even we have spoken about this theory about BCG vaccine. A few experts have noted that in countries where universal BCG vaccine has been administered, the outbreak of COVID-19 has somehow been miraculously contained. For example, if you just look at the Iberian Peninsula, you have countries such as Spain and Portugal, which are neighboring countries. If Spain has witnessed around 2 lakh cases and 20,000 deaths, neighboring country Portugal has hardly witnessed around 20,000 cases. And interestingly, the BCG vaccine, which is given against tuberculosis, is a universal vaccine administered in Portugal, but not in the case of Spain. Even if you look at the United States and Italy, BCG vaccine is not administered universally in these countries, whereas BCG vaccine is universal in all South Asian countries such as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. But however, experts have still not validated this theory because there is no conclusive evidence or proof to show that the BCG vaccine is being effective against COVID-19. The writer makes a similar claim about the exposure of South Asian countries to malaria, but again, this theory is not conclusive, it has not been proven. And studies that have been conducted until now have not shown that excessive heat or temperature could have an impact on coronavirus. But however, these are some of the hypotheses that has been presented by the writer in order to possibly explain this paradox, wherein South Asian countries with very high population density and weak healthcare systems have somehow miraculously escaped the impact of COVID-19. But on the other hand, developed countries in North America and Western Europe with lower population density and sophisticated healthcare systems have taken a major hit. Now let's take up a column from page number 6, which deals with the dispute in the South China Sea. Even as the Southeast Asian countries, the United States and the rest of the world have been busy dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, it appears that China is exploiting the opportunity created by the pandemic to increase its aggression and disputed claims in the South China Sea. Over the last couple of months, it has been noticed that China has increased its military exercises in the South China Sea, it has deployed more maritime assets in the region, and it has even celebrated the success of its energy exploitation in the disputed South China Sea. All these developments point to increased assertiveness and aggressiveness of China with regard to the South China Sea dispute. For example, in early April, there was an incident near Paracel Islands which helps us understand China's aggression in the South China Sea. See, the Paracel Islands in South China Sea is disputed between China and Vietnam. In this particular incident, a boat belonging to the Chinese Coast Guard deliberately crashed and sunk a Vietnamese fishing boat. And in the past as well, similar aggression has been shown by the Chinese Navy, the Chinese Coast Guard, and even Chinese fishing vessels with the backing of its Navy and Coast Guard. So these incidents illustrate the aggressiveness that China is displaying near the Paracel Islands in order to further extend its maritime claims in the region. Then something similar has been observed in the Natuna Sea, which is a part of the South China Sea. The Natuna Sea has emerged as a new source of dispute between China and Indonesia. Recently in the Natuna Sea, Chinese fishing vessels with the backing of the Chinese Coast Guard have indulged in illegal fishing, and these incidents have global ramifications because it shows China's willingness to deliberately violate the maritime laws that have been laid out under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Then if we move towards the West Philippine Sea, China has displayed its aggression at the Kagetingan Reef and the Zamora Reef. Recently, satellite pictures have emerged showing the landing of a Chinese military plane at the disputed Kagitingen Reef. This reef is disputed between China and Philippines. Then, according to reports, China has established a couple of research stations, one at the Kagitingen Reef and one at the Zamora Reef, which is also disputed between China and Philippines, in order to study the geology, ecology and environment of the disputed Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. In the previous classes, we have discussed that Spratly Islands is disputed between China and a number of Southeast Asian countries, including Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan, Philippines, etc. These acts of China, even during a pandemic, shows that its aggression in the South China Sea has not diminished and it has not given up on its strategy of regional expansionism. On the other hand, the United States is also a major player in the South China Sea because the US has been supporting Southeast Asian countries such as Philippines, Vietnam and Indonesia in their disputes against China. So following these recent developments in the South China Sea, the United States has also criticized China for exploiting the pandemic. See, China knows very well that its aggressive moves in the South China Sea is going to affect its close relations with the Southeast Asian countries and as well as its carefully nurtured global image. But despite this, if China is going ahead with its strategy, it means that it is trying to exploit the window of opportunity that has been created by the COVID-19 pandemic. See, as a result of the pandemic, all Southeast Asian countries, including Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines and Indonesia and even the United States, are preoccupied with their domestic efforts to contain the spread of the virus, and they are preoccupied with dealing with the economic impact of the lockdown. So this creates a window of opportunity for China, and it is probably trying to exploit this opportunity in order to further its territorial claims in the disputed South China Sea. This could also be China's reaction to express its displeasure against the FONOPS that the United States had recently conducted with Vietnam. See, FONOPS stands for Freedom of Navigation Operations. See, with regard to the South China Sea dispute, the United States has always tried to champion the cause of freedom of navigation, which is a basic right available in international waters under international law. While countering China's aggression in the South China Sea, the US has always maintained that China has an international obligation to uphold freedom of navigation. And whenever this freedom has been disrupted by China, the United States has worked with its allies such as Vietnam, Philippines, etc. to deploy its own navy into the South China Sea and conduct joint exercises known as FONOPS or Freedom of Navigation Operations. These naval operations of the United States in association with Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries has always been resisted by China. So China could possibly be exploiting this opportunity created by the COVID-19 pandemic in order to express its displeasure against the FONOPS that are conducted by the US Navy. And the Southeast Asian countries on their part are working under the regional grouping ASEAN in order to develop a code of conduct that would prevent such clashes and tensions in the South China Sea, and that would help the ASEAN countries to provide a coordinated response against China's aggression in the South China Sea. Now let's take up the next article. The government has decided to amend the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code in order to suspend its operation for up to a period of 1 year. The government has taken this decision in order to help out those companies which might default on their loans and commitments as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Because see, under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, banks which have provided loans to companies can initiate insolvency proceedings against them if they default on their loans and commitments. These provisions are contained in Section 7 and 9 of the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code. Then the law also allows the companies that default on their loans and commitments to file for insolvency resolution on their own under Section 10 of the IBC Code. So considering that a number of companies might default on their loans and commitments due to the losses incurred during the COVID-19 pandemic, the government has decided to bring in an ordinance to amend the IBC Code, which will suspend these 3 sections. These sections will be initially suspended for a period of 6 months, but depending on the economic situation, it can be extended up to 1 year. So this decision will not only provide a breathing space for companies, but it will also provide an opportunity to these banks which have given loans to them to restructure these loans during this suspension period. Now let's take up the practice questions. The region known as Swabhiman Anchal is located in the Malkangiri district of Odisha. Option C is the right answer. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 4, the tribal communities that are found in the Swabhiman Anchal region in the Malkangiri district of Odisha, they are being left out of food security programs and as well as social welfare programs. The implementation of these schemes has failed in the Swabhiman Anchal region because of 3 reasons. 1. Geographically, the Swabhiman Anchal region has been cut off from the mainland. Second, the region is a hotbed for Naxal and Maoist activity. And third, the local administration has failed in the delivery of basic services. Please look at this map. See, the Malkangiri district of Odisha is a hotbed for Naxal activity and it is a tribal dominated area. Within the Malkangiri district, you have a region behind the Balimela reservoir that is usually referred to as the cutoff area or also known as the Swabhiman Anchal region. The backwaters of the Balimela reservoir had cut off this region and as a result, the tribal communities in this region had lost connectivity with mainland. This lack of connectivity had also resulted in administrative neglect for years together, and this made the tribal communities all the more vulnerable to the influence of Naxal ideology. Then also note that the Balimela reservoir has been built on the Machkund river, which is also known as the Sileru river locally. This river flows into Chhattisgarh and it drains into the Sabri river, which is one of the important tributaries of the Godavari river. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which of the following events preceded the Jallianwala Bagh massacre? Defense of India Act, Rowlatt Act, Hunter Commission. Amongst the given statements, the third one is incorrect, so option B is the right answer. See, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre took place on the 13th of April 1919, whereas the Defense of India Act was passed during the World War in 1915 in order to curb civil and political liberties and weaken the national movement. Then at the end of the First World War, the British government in India introduced the controversial Rowlatt Act in March 1919. The Rowlatt Act was seen as an extension to the Defense of India Act, and its objective was also to curb civil and political liberties and weaken the national movement. These two controversial legislations resulted in the outbreak of protests across the country, and the peaceful protests that were going on at Jallianwala Bagh was a part of these protests. On this fateful day, when peaceful protests were going on at Jallianwala Bagh, Brigadier General Dyer ordered British troops to open fire against unarmed and peaceful protesters, resulting in the death of nearly 400 plus people. This horrific incident generated widespread protests and resistance against the British government in India, and in order to investigate the massacre and the acts of Brigadier General Dyer, the British government finally set up the Hunter Commission in October 1919. This question was asked because the 100 years ago article on page number 7 makes a reference to the Jallianwala Bagh massacre and as well as to the Hunter Commission. Now let's take up the next practice question. The Industrial Relations Code 2019, which is pending in the Parliament, intends to subsume and replace which of the following labour laws? The Industrial Disputes Act 1947, the Trade Unions Act 1926, the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946. All the 3 are correct, so option D is the right answer. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 8, the Parliamentary Standing Committee, which is examining the Industrial Relations Code of 2019, has submitted that it is injustifiable to force industrial establishments to pay wages during disasters and natural calamities as proposed under the Industrial Relations Code of 2019. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? Biosafety level is a set of biocontainment precautions required to isolate dangerous biological agents in an enclosed laboratory facility. This statement is correct, and these labs which have taken such biocontainment precautions are known as biosafety labs. Let's look at the second statement. The levels of containment range from the lowest biosafety level, that is 4 or BSL 4, to the highest level, that is level 1 or BSL 1. This statement is incorrect because labs that have been designated as BSL 1 will have the lowest biosafety standards, whereas labs that have been designated as BSL 4, they will have the highest precautions and the highest level of biosafety standards. So the correct answer is option A, 1 only. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 11, the DRDO has developed a mobile lab that can be used to diagnose COVID-19 and other viral infections. And this mobile laboratory comes with biosafety level 3 and 2 precautions. Now let's take up the next practice question. Consider the following statements with regard to the Gaganyaan mission. The mission is planned to be launched on ISRO's GSLV Mach 3 launch vehicle. The spacecraft will be placed in a low Earth orbit of 300 to 400 kilometers. 4 scientists of ISRO are currently undergoing training in Russia to be the first set of potential candidates for the Gaganyaan mission. Amongst the given statements, the third statement is incorrect, so option C is the right answer. See, it is not 4 scientists of ISRO who are being trained in Russia to be a part of the Gaganyaan mission, but it is 4 fighter pilots selected from the Indian Air Force who are being trained for this mission. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 16, ISRO has invited proposals for the development of critical technologies such as thermal protection, radiation suits, life support systems, etc. that are needed for human spaceflight missions. Now let's take up a practice question from the 2019 prelims paper. Consider the following statements. The motion to impeach a judge of the Supreme Court of India cannot be rejected by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha as per the Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. This statement is incorrect. The Speaker can reject such a motion. The second statement says, the Constitution of India defines and gives details of what constitutes incapacity and proved misbehavior of the judges of the Supreme Court of India. This statement is also incorrect because the Constitution doesn't define any of these details. The third statement says that the details of the process of impeachment of the judges of the Supreme Court of India are given in the Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. This is a correct statement. The fourth statement says, if the motion for the impeachment of a judge is taken up for voting, the law requires the motion to be backed by each house of the parliament and supported by a majority of total membership of that house and by not less than 2/3 of total members of that house present and voting. This statement is also correct. So option C is the right answer. And also remember that the Constitution does not use the word impeachment to refer to the removal process of a judge of the Supreme Court. But however, legally, this process is referred to as impeachment, and that's the reason why the question also makes the same reference. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, what could explain the far fewer COVID-19 infections and deaths in South Asia compared to North America and Western Europe? The second question, even as several countries struggle to cope with the challenges posed by COVID-19, Beijing's military moves in the contested South China Sea continue to take place unabated. Comment. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.